All right, welcome back to this Snod Pod with John Snodgrass, your mortgage resource, where we're talking real estate, mortgages, and beyond. I've got Aletha Champine, a real estate agent with Keller Williams Wauwatosa here with us. Thanks again for sticking around for a second episode here. So last episode we talked a lot about, buyers and, different investment and whatnot. So let's go to the sell side. When you are working with a seller and you got a listing, tell me how that conversation goes and, how you talk about, where you're going to set the price. And
so, that's almost the hardest part of my job, right? Because sellers are typically emotionally attached to their homes. Their memories have literally unfolded in that space for, sometimes decades. So there's a value to that house that they have that might not match what the market believes that value is. So you kind of have to go in with questions before leading with information. Let the information and the data speak for itself. And that's kind of where my research background that I mentioned in the last episode comes in, of just saying, this is the amount of mortgage applications that are coming in. This time last year, it was tanking because the rates were going up. This time, and you would know more about it than I would, seems to be pretty steady.
Yeah.
So we're looking at things like that, expireds, list to sell ratio. And what that means is, if the house lists at 250, is it selling below 250 or above? And like 100%, list to sell means homes are averaging out to sell at list price or above. And then their timeline and why they're moving. And so all those conversations kind of help me build out a plan. Especially because this market moves so quickly and things can shift and change, in a moment's notice, right? If the Federal Reserve meets and rates end up going higher, things could slow. So if their timeline is 3 months versus 3 days, it's really going to change how I build out the plan that we're working on through together. And so I don't leave that initial meeting with a seller with a price.
Okay.
I usually walk through, especially if they've owned it for quite a few years. I'm taking notes on, updates that they've made, kind of the finishes that are there currently. And then I'm building a plan based on their motivation. Are they wanting to, have staging and paint and things like that? And are they willing to spend a little money up front to kind of make it, sell for more? Or are they just like, we have a job transfer out of town, we need to leave it a month?
Got to get out of here.
It's going to completely change the approach that we build and how we take it to market. And I think that I really lead with kind of a concierge approach, both with my buyers and my sellers. The other conversation we're having is, where are they going?
Sure.
The market's tight, as you know, and we need to be able to kind of build a plan to make sure that they don't end up homeless.
Right.
Even though they've cashed in on their, on their huge asset, they aren't like couch surfing at, 55 years old or something.
Going to, European vacation.
Right. So, which, I wouldn't discourage them from doing, but take advantage of the market and go live your best life. But yeah. So that's kind of how I'm approaching sellers right now. And I'm also, I'm really encouraging them to talk to, you, the lender,
Thank you.
is by, because I think that people oftentimes are like, we can afford X, Y, and Z in our next house, thinking that they're, still carrying the current mortgage that they have.
Right.
And so I'm saying, okay, have your lender run and for you, I'll just, I've picked up the phone and just told you to do it.
Yeah.
Run numbers as if they've sold their house for, XX dollars, right? So I usually kind of, I'm very conservative. Yeah. I lead with that approach in all my client meetings, buyers or sellers, that I tend to be more conservative on the approach on really anything. And saying, hey, let's run those numbers to see what you can afford with having sold this house.
Sure.
And that's kind of given them peace of mind when it comes to searching, and then also help them motivate to like, okay, well, what do we need to do to get top dollar? Because if you're saying we can sell our house for $450 in this current state, what about if we do X, Y, and Z and sell it for $550? And then being able to kind of more comfortably focus on their buy as well.
It seems like, and this is kind of relevant, that some people might be afraid, like, oh, I don't have enough time to buy a new house. But it seems really popular right now that, sellers are in, the power position, if you will, seller's market, where, part of the offers that you might be receiving, or maybe you're conveying to some of the agents if they're saying, hey, Aletha, what's important to the seller and you representing them. It seems like Addendum O, which is where the seller, after the loan or purchase transaction closes, they rent back the house from the person that's buying it. And Fannie Mae, on a lending side of things, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac state that, hey, if there's an Addendum O involved, the maximum amount you can rent back is 60 days if you want the best possible rates, which are primary home or primary residence rates. So, I mean, when you factor in, I guess, kind of two-part question, are you seeing the rent back or Addendum O? Yeah. And then, if I'm the seller, I'm thinking like, okay, I've got an accepted offer on, let's just say July 1st. I'm closing on August 5th. Hey, I can actually rent back till September, October. We'll say October 4th because August has 31 days. Yeah. Don't want to go 61 days. So essentially giving them 3 months to find a new house. And they don't have to worry as much because a lot of things that we deal with is trying to help somebody buy a home before they sell, which we can do and, get into a bridge loan and stuff. But I'm rambling, but I guess it sounds like you do see. Oh, yeah. So I would say almost every offer I'm writing for buyers right now is either having a component of true flexibility, right, that I'm drafting into the contract, or an Addendum O attached. Sometimes I've left Addendum O's blank and sent it over with the offer, included it, and just let the sellers fill it out as they want. Just remember 60 days.
Well, yeah, I'm very 61 days is
too many.
It's too many. So we'll also do a longer closing date. So theoretically, closing date can go 60 days. You could theoretically close 180 days out, but who knows where the race would be. You can just lock yourself into a contract. So standard, and nothing standardized in real estate. Probably shouldn't have used that word, but the kind of common practice is a 60-day or flexible closing and then up to 60-day rent back. Got it. Addendum O is essentially a post-occupancy is what it's called. And that way, when I'm talking to sellers and they're like, well, we would love to sell right now. This house is too much for us to care for, or, our family's growing, we're going out, but where do we go? I'm like, okay, well, what if I told you we could, get your house under contract for top dollar today and then buy 4 months to look for your next house? The average real estate transaction is 30 to 45 days. So, they can lose out on quite a few homes, which I consider our learning experiences. Right. And then find the one with plenty of time left over. And then theoretically ask the new buyers, hey, do you want to truncate that Addendum O or close sooner? And, line up the dominoes like that. Right. Yeah. And it kind of, takes out the stress of owning 2 homes at the same time or, avoids a bridge loan. Avoids a expensive. Bridge loan, which we offer and which, come in handy when they're needed. Absolutely. If you've got to buy a home before you sell, which is sometimes the case. So let's just maybe, change course over to kind of buy side stuff. I mean, it just is so hard to get an accepted offer these days. So when you're talking to the buyer, I guess I'm just thinking I feel like I get buyers the first time, I'm just going to just do 20% down. I want a home inspection. I want an appraisal. I want a loan, all this stuff in this market. It's like, man, you can't do that. I mean, that's more your conversation. Right. I try to I usually tee them up so you have an easier conversation, which I just sent some people over to you yesterday. So they're relocating from out of state. Okay. But they came with that, and then 20% down. And I was like, actually, I said, and I always preface it because you're an expert in your field and I'm, and I think that's why we work so well together. But I always say, make sure you're talking to the lender about that because they'll have a better idea of your financial picture. But 9 times out of 10, putting 20% down is actually going to cost you more money. And then they're like deer in headlights, like, well, yeah, but our parents said 20% down.
Right, yeah.
And I've now explained that, kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, as a result of 2008, the PMI, your private mortgage insurance, goes away if you put 20% or more down.
Correct.
Banks like having an insurance policy. It's peace of mind is kind of how I explain it. So I'm twofold. I'm like, talk to your lender about kind of working the numbers, for one. And for two, be careful. Don't feel like you have to put 20% down, because ultimately the homes resettle with new owners.
Yeah.
Something's going to go wrong.
Right.
9 times out of 10, it's the water heater, right? It goes from like 1 shower to 10 in, overnight, and it just breaks.
Yeah.
So the worst thing you can do is make yourself cash poor when you buy the house, and then, something breaks, you're putting it on a credit card, and all of a sudden, in being insistent on putting 20% down to save a couple $100 a month is now putting you in debt. It's a risk.
Right. Well, and kind of piggyback on what you're saying too. I mean, so a lot of times, we've had discussions kind of together, and then sometimes separately, like, hey, it might be worth on the offer writing 25% down, and I've got to verify that they've got it. But like I had a recent one, home in the Highlands where, family was there for 4 decades, 5 decades, beautiful home, but it needs to be restored to its glory. And so they got the offer, and then and we kind of talked about this beforehand too. And I suggested, hey, you're talking about doing a lot of renovation. I mean, why don't we get the house, we'll get you approved, and then after you're approved with the bank I'm selling the loan to, hey, we're good, let's back it down to 15% down, because
keep the cash on hand.
Keep the cash. So let's say it's a $500,000 house, every 5% is $25,000. So if you keep an extra 10 or 10% of your pocket, that's $50,000, and hey, that's going to go a long way.
Well, and it's also building equity, right? That if you're putting that back into the house, you're, and you're able to then refinance the PMI off, because now all of a sudden you've put it into the house, you've made the house more livable to your taste. And now your house is worth more, that, you actually do have 20% of equity in the home, where you can roll that off. That's what my husband and I did, is we bought a fixer-upper. We put 3.5% down, and, this was 2020, or we don't need to talk about what the rates were back then. And we redid a kitchen, and, and immediately rolled that off. You
got equity, as soon as you finish your projects. The other thing too is, for whatever reason, our parents, 20% down, you don't want PMI. And it's like, well, what's happened? So I've been doing this 19 years. And when I got in the business, there was like, a rate card that all the mortgage insurance companies had. And the price was the price if your credit was 720 to 739. Now it's like almost like a black box, where when I create a file, I have your income, your assets, your credit. I click a button, and in a matter of seconds, I get all the mortgage insurance companies' prices. And it's gotten so competitive.
They're just going down.
The mortgage insurance very cheap. And so, like, on this client I was talking about, the Highlands house, like, it was like, I don't know, $50 for a pretty sizable, mortgage in the 500s.
Which that, in comparison to taking a HELOC to do the renovation, is,
prime is 8.25%.
So you're, for $50 a month, you're keeping the cash on hand, paying cash for the renovation, and saving the money on the home equity line. Like, it's, the math is sometimes not always favorable, and in some cases I'm sure it is to do 20% down, but it's just it's more of a myth. The other myth that we have is, the closing date is always 30 days. There's flexibility on that. There's just a lot of different ways to do it, and most importantly, I think most people don't realize that the loan product that they use, if their agents and themselves are actually reading the offer to purchase contract, they can do whatever they want. There needs to be no permission from the seller to go from a conventional to an FHA. It's a little bit more nuanced, because there's kind of details that do impact the seller when you're switching to a government loan. But I think agents can feel more comfortable saying, hey, we can write the offer with 20%. Now, like you said, you have to qualify to do the 20%. But then you could back down and
scenes,
only put 5 if you want.
Right, or 3 if you're a first-time home buyer.
If the house is ready to go and doesn't need any improvement, feel free to put 20. But if all of a sudden you fall in love with a fixer-upper and you decide to want to keep that cash, you can still write 20. It's a really strong offer at 20% down or more, and then keep that in the bank.
Yeah, in again, with writing the offer, like, again, if you got the money and you want to put 25% down, great. But a lot of times I get those first-time home buyers who are like, they've got the 20%, but that's it. And I'm just like, you got to buy furniture, you got to buy a lawnmower, you got to buy,
and just in case, you should always keep some money on hand.
Yeah, just in case stuff comes up. Like my water heater broke shortly after I bought that. Furnace, I just was told we won't get into that.
Yeah,
got to replace that. Anyways,
I know. But homeownership is still a great wealth building tool. Well, and that's the thing is, I think that and when you're going when I'm working with buyers, I'm like, hold on, let's just kind of myth bust a little bit at the beginning, and also explain that the market itself is nuanced, that you can kind of adapt the approach into the market for buyers based on what fits them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I like to do, is just really kind of match make both the process and the home to the specific client.
Yeah. So like our cash offer program, I kind of told you about it a little bit. It's just so hard to get a home these days.
So and the clients that I've sent over to you earlier this week, it's the once, I'm saying, listen, if you have the ability to write, a cash offer and you're not in competition with some, with being financed, it's one less contingency that is making the sellers take pause, right? Because sellers are comparing sometimes 10 different offers and, sometimes even more. And all that they're doing is really looking at peace of mind. What on paper gives us the peace of mind that we will have a smooth transaction to the closing table, especially because they're usually rolling proceeds. So they're looking for peace of mind, and contingencies kind of, poke holes in that, right? So what I love about what you guys are offering is that it's essentially underwritten and you're backing it up with actual cash and saying, hey, this buyer is so strong that we feel confident that they can write a cash offer. We're going to get this to close. And it's allowing my buyers to write much more competitive offers in a very competitive market. Yeah.
And we're actually showing a proof of funds letter. So like hypothetical, let's just try to use easier numbers. Like, so it's $100,000 purchase. Ultimately, they're going to write a cash offer. Ultimately, I'm still doing a loan. Let's just say they're putting 20% down. I'm still giving them an $80,000 loan. They're still putting 20% down. But in the environment we're in, with our kind of, incredible pre-approval that we provide already, it's awesome. But we've got that step up the cash offer program where we vet the customer. The owners of A+ are going to dig into everything. It's not for everybody. Right. And they've got to be well qualified. You have to put a minimum of 10% down. But at the end of the day, we basically put a proof of funds letter and say, hey, Aletha, you're the listing agent. We are guaranteeing $80,000 to your buyer. Now, they've provided us with a bank statement of $50,000. So we're going to give you their bank statement, most recent, a couple weeks ago. They've got 50, we've got 80. The purchase price is 100. Obviously, 80 plus 50 is 130. So they've got plenty of money to pay cash. And the owners are signing this document. I've gotten 2 of these done, and it's hard to conceptualize it. So I pick up the phone and I call and I kind of say what I just said, like, no, this is. And I think that's important. I mean, any good lender in this market is working like the agent and picking up the phone. And so, that's why I love working with you, because you'll do that. But it's also allowing, I think, the buyers to feel less stress. Yeah, it's really giving them more control over the market. Yeah. And there's still, the underwriting process is a little invasive to some. Yeah. And so going through that on the front end it removes that stress on their end of like, oh my God, what if the bank changes their mind? You know what? They're not. They've they've put you through all the investigative, kind of
the accounting and all those things.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And you're good. Like, you know, you got a clean bill of health, you're good to buy a house. And so I think it also decreases the stress and anxiety on the sell side. It's really a win-win, and it's definitely something that I'm telling my buyers of at least sit down and explore it, because it could be the difference of your, you know, dream home versus losing out.
Yeah. Well, hey, this has been great. We could talk a lot more. I know you got to run. I got to run too in a little bit, but this has been fun. Let's do it again.
Of course. We'll have you on our podcast.
Yeah. What's the name of your podcast?
Married to Growth.
Married
to my husband
Growth.
And I, yeah.
And we can pretty much find it on
all of them. Yep.
All
Spotify,
the sites. Apple.
Oh, yeah.
Married to Growth. Check it out. Aletha and her husband, business owners. Super cool podcast. Aletha, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, this has been great.
Aletha Champine, Keller Williams, real estate agent out of Tosa. She covers a lot more than Tosa. But thanks for listening to us. Hopefully we've given you some good nuggets on home buying and selling process. But I'm John Snodgrass. This is the Snod Pod, where we're talking real estate, mortgages, and beyond. Thanks for coming in again. We'll see you next time.